Welcome to Talking Buffalo, featuring conversations with guests from around the world of sports, media, pop culture, and all things Buffalo. With your host, Patrick Moran.
All right, what is going on, everybody? How you doing? Welcome to another episode of Talking Buffalo, your weekday daily driver for Buffalo sports talk and more. My name is Patrick Moran. Big thank you to all of you out there for watching, for listening, for following, for subscribing. I appreciate y'all very, very much. If you're a regular listener or watcher of this program, I apologize for yesterday's show. I had my good buddy Anthony Marino on with me, and it had been a few weeks since I had Anthony on, and it was just a nightmare in terms of internet connectivity. It happens from time to time. It's an unfortunate part about doing these types of podcasts. You know, when you connect via the internet, on one hand, it's awesome because you can talk to literally anybody in the world. They don't have to be in the same studio or restaurant, wherever you're doing your show from. They could be from quite literally anywhere in the world, as long as the internet works. That's the great part. The downside is when you're not with somebody face to face, you are completely reliant on the internet. And from time to time, the internet just acts shitty. And that's what it did yesterday. So the video froze plenty of times. The audio was choppy at times because of that sound, that you hear when the internet's going in and out. I do apologize for that. That said, I mean, it wasn't that bad. There were certainly some moments, but all in all, first of all, it was a great conversation that I had with Anthony. It was great to have him back on the show. And for the most part, the audio and the video was good. But if you watched it, if you listened to it and you got through it and you noticed, like I said, Anthony freezing up a lot or just some sound, coming off as weird at times, I do apologize for that. Hopefully, with this show and going forward, that will be a big rarity when we have them. Today, I want to talk about the under the radar X factors for the Buffalo Bills for this 2024 season. A season that is starting just 9 days from now. This is the last episode of the week. Next week will be pretty much all Buffalo Bills season preview episodes. I'll have a variety of guests. In fact, we're going to be doing a couple of live shows. Cannot wait to tell you more about them. I'll do that at the very beginning of next week, but you're definitely going to want to lock in for those. But yeah, today's going to be kind of under the radar type X factors. I'm not talking about the biggest and necessarily the most talked about X factors. So we'll hit on that today. Some actual news first. The Buffalo Bills added two, I guess we'll call them prospects to the practice squad that to me, and I'm sure many of you out there, are very intriguing. First and foremost, they signed Lewis Cine to the Bills practice squad. Now, apparently, reportedly, I should say, on Wednesday, he was going to the Jets, but he changed his mind, and ultimately he spurned the New York Jets, the Bills' AFC East Division rival, and he's signing with the Buffalo Bills. If you don't know really anything about Lewis Cine, he is a former first-round pick. He was a first-round pick of the Vikings back in 2022. His rookie year, he suffered a compound fracture, ended up missing his rookie season. Last year, he just couldn't work his way onto the field for the Vikings. The Vikings had a really good secondary. They're strong at the safety spot last year. Probably got more in demand besides having the pedigree of being a former first-round pick. Probably a little bit more in demand than he would be because he had an outstanding week 2 preseason game for Minnesota against the Cleveland Browns. In that game, he had 11 tackles. He had an interception. He had a sack. He had 2 quarterback hits. He had a tackle for a loss. It was like some Joe Andreessen against Pittsburgh week 2 preseason level shit. He was awesome in that game. Our good friends over at Cover One, the book on him, and by the way, if you have not yet subscribed to the Cover One Discord, their insider pass, worth the money, I promise you. If you really like breakdowns, if you like film, if you like learning a lot about prospects and veterans that you otherwise wouldn't know about, it is worth it just for the film alone. Their Discord channel, it's unbelievable. But the Cover One book on them, and again, I put pretty good stock into what those guys over there think. Good athleticism, matches up well with tight ends and running backs. Good speed, good range to close on the football quickly. Cover One writes that his instincts are lacking, like his anticipation of routes. They say he's not a zone eyes type of player. Late to crossing routes, needs to play with more urgency. Not my words. These are the words over from Cover One. And then the last thing they said, which is a positive, signs of an explosive tackler with a pretty good radius. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. My natural tendency when you get a player, either whether it's off waivers or a player that's been cut and you add them to your practice squad, my natural tendency is to always question the level of enthusiasm that all the fans get, because you want to talk this guy up. You want to pop in the film. You want to look at all the good plays he's made, the good things he's done. And that's fair. But my mindset is always when a player gets cut, when he gets released, especially if he's a former first round pick and a young player on top of that, my first thought is always, well, if this player's so good, why'd he get cut from the team? And there's exceptions. There's times, look, there's times where it's just about a fit, or at times it's just about a numbers game. I'll give you an example with the Bills. Now, this is not a former first round pick. This was a no-name undrafted free agent, but a good player. I like Kingsley Jonathan, right? But with the Bills this summer, Kingsley Jonathan didn't make the 53-man roster. He is on the practice squad, of course, but he didn't make the 53-man roster, not because at least I don't think it's not because he didn't play well enough. I think it's about a numbers game. They were only going to keep 6 ends. And ultimately they decided that Casey Toohill, a bigger name and a guy who apparently, which unbeknownst to me, is better on special teams than Kingsley Jonathan, but that's the dude they went with. My point is, if Kingsley Jonathan got cut by the Bills and he signed with the Raiders, and you're a Raiders fan and you're looking at the film, you're like, oh, he did some good things. He did some good things. Well, then there's the pessimists like me who'll be like, well, if he's so good, why'd the Bills cut him? Well, it's not because he wasn't a good player. It wasn't because he wasn't good enough to play in this league, on this team. It's just simply a numbers game. Or, like I said, in some cases, maybe a player is just not a good fit, or they just flat out need a change of scenery. So I do understand that. But again, I keep always coming back to, well, the player got cut. And overall, that tends to make me suspicious. Plus, he went through waivers. So, I mean, if he was a player that, 31 other teams, unless I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure he went through waivers. He did. 31 other teams, if they really wanted him, if they wanted seen, they could have added him, and they didn't. So just always, I'm not saying to not like the signing. I'm not saying that there's not good upside. I'm not saying that there's reason to be optimistic. I'm just saying I like to kind of pump the brakes when you add a player that was cut from another team. On the plus side, you can look at it this way too. Sean McDermott does really good work with safeties. And Sean, again, was a former first-round pick just in 2022. If the Bills would have cut their own former first-round pick, Kyrie Elam, say if they would have did that after last season and he was off this team as recent, say February, March, probably wouldn't blink an eye. And there would be fans from other teams saying, well, he's a former first-round pick. The talent's there. Maybe he just needed to change the scenery. Wasn't a good fit for the Bills or whatever. Could have been wrong with Buffalo. And then Kyrie Elam goes to the San Francisco 49ers and becomes a really solid player. That is certainly possible for Sean to do that with Buffalo. Again, with a coach like Sean McDermott that has historically gotten the most out of his safeties. And a few people I did talk to, not many, but I talked to a couple people. One of them, a big Vikings fan, said that, who also followed the Bills, said that they think that Scene is a better talent than DeMar Hamlin. So we'll see. So anyway, that's one move. And then they also signed a wide receiver, Jalen Virgil, from Denver. They added him to the practice squad. Virgil is a third-year player, another undrafted free agent, 2022, out of Appalachian State. Shout out Appalachian State. As a rookie with Denver, 2 catches, 75 yards and a tutty. He missed all of last year with a meniscus injury in his knee. So he basically only played a little bit his rookie year, did not play at all last year. I asked Benjamin Albright, who covers the Denver Broncos and is a very respected NFL analyst and insider who's based out in Denver. I asked Ben for his take on Virgil, and he said, and I'll quote here, elite straight line speed guy, can contribute on special teams, showed flashes on the field for sure. Not the world's fastest learner. If you're patient, you may be rewarded. So again, that's Benjamin Albright, somebody who has seen him up close and personal over the past couple of years. That's his opinion, his take on Virgil. Kid is a speedster, ran a 4.3740 on his pro day a couple of years ago. So size, 6 foot tall, around 205, 210 pounds. Think maybe kind of a gadgety guy too. Again, some value on special teams. Think maybe a bigger version of Isaiah McKenzie. I'll say this about him, just like I feel the same way about Scene. Practice squad guys, but guys who have the potential at least to ultimately be elevated to this roster and be a factor. The Bills are currently only carrying 5 receivers. And I know Shavers has been here all summer. I know Hamler has been here all summer. They were in the mix. Ultimately, didn't make the team, brought back to the practice squad. You could throw Virgil in that mix as well. So very much possibility. So those are 2 not big moves that the Bills made Wednesday into Thursday, but certainly notable. All right, I want to get going here with our under the radar Bills X factors. And I say under the radar because some things are like obvious X factors for Buffalo this year. Like Joe Brady is an obvious X factor. He's a huge X factor. This is his first full offseason as offensive coordinator. Last year, we took over week 11, kind of on the fly. This year, he's had an entire offseason to implement the offense that he wants to have. I'm sure he had his hand in the cookie jar of Bills management and what kind of personnel was going to be on the team this year, what type of receivers they got, what the plays are going to look like. Joe Brady's hands, as they should be as offensive coordinator, are all over that. He's an obvious X factor. Curtis Samuel, an obvious X factor. Not probably, he was the biggest free agent offseason acquisition for Buffalo at a little more over I think around $8 million. He's the highest paid Buffalo Bills free agent offseason acquisition. And I think he's going to have a big role on this team. I talked about it a little bit on the show with Anthony. It's foolish to compare Curtis Samuel to Stephon Diggs because Stephon Diggs for 4 years was the workhorse on this offense. He quite literally rewrote the Buffalo Bills receiving record book, 100 catches, 4 straight years, an elite talent, one of the top 10 receivers in the NFL for sure. During his time here, maybe even top 5, no worse than top 10. Hell, he's still a top 10 to 15 receiver. At least many people would think that. So I'm not saying that Curtis Samuel is an upgrade over what Stephon Diggs has been to the Buffalo Bills, but Curtis Samuel and his role this year on this football team, this specific 2024 Buffalo Bills team, and this specific offense could be every bit as important, even if the numbers aren't there, because he's going to do a lot of things. He's going to line up in the slot. He's going to line up outside. He's going to line up in the backfield. He might get deep. He's going to work intermediate routes. He's going to run jet sweeps. He's going to be a decoy. He caught one pass in the preseason. That's it. A quick little bubble screen, bam, 15 yards before you can blink your eye. So he's going to be in a very, very, very important factor for the Bills offense this year. And I think he could be better in 2024 than what you saw in the back half anyway of Stephon Diggs with 2023. I also think Khalil Shakir is a pretty obvious X factor as well. Probably the most established receiver, certainly the returning established receiver on this team. Great hands. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I consider him a Cole Beasley type with that extra gear that Cole Beasley didn't have. Those are obvious guys. I think Tyler Bass is another one. That is an obvious X factor. His confidence better be there because it certainly doesn't seem like it's there right now. Brandon Beane spoke about him earlier this week. Basically, kind of, he said he has not even considered at this point in time even bringing a kicker in to put on the practice squad. But also kind of, I thought it was noteworthy too, talking about his history and how he's been good before. Pretty much he's saying without saying, this dude is struggling right now and he's got to get his head right. At least that's the way I interpreted his comments. That's obvious. Tyler Bass, if he's not right, he may cost the Bills a game. Missing a last second 43-yarder, and that could be the difference between winning the division and being a wild card team, or hell, not even making the playoffs at all. And then the last thing, of course, it's obvious with every team in the NFL is roster health. The Bills have been decimated, quite frankly, by injuries the last couple of years, but they've also been healthy in other areas. Most notably, of course, quarterback, because Josh Allen don't miss games. You can't take that shit for granted. So roster health is another one that's an obvious X factor. But as in ones that are not so obvious, I got a handful of them. I'm not going to deep dive too much because, again, I don't want to keep you guys here for a full hour and stuff. But Connor McGovern, he's right near the top of like my under the radar Bills X factors. Him working out at center is going to be huge for the Buffalo Bills this year. Mitch Morse was solid. Not spectacular, but certainly solid. Health issues, concussion stuff earlier in his career, but he played every game last year and he was solid. Again, solid, not spectacular. Connor McGovern was the left guard. Now he's the center. Connor McGovern has played plenty of center in his life, but not in the NFL. The Bills are hopeful. The Bills are confident, obviously, but he's no sure thing. Truth is, till you see it, you're not quite sure what you're going to get from him at center. During training camp, early in camp, it felt like there was some problems with some exchanges, some snaps, couple shotguns, couple handoffs, or a couple of regular snaps between him and Josh. But that seemed to go away in the back end of camp, and it wasn't much of a factor at all in the preseason. Not like he played a lot in the preseason, but it's certainly something to keep your eyes on. We could talk about all the wide receivers, Dalton Kincaid, the running game, and of course, Josh himself. We could talk about that for all of eternity, but the center is the anchor of the offensive line. And if for whatever reason, Connor McGovern isn't up to task, that could be a problem because then you're looking at two options. One is a fifth round rookie, and the other one is an interior backup lineman with no real starting experience. More on that in just a second as well. But the upside of him, I'm saying all gloom and doom about Connor McGovern. There's plenty of upside. He's bigger, he's stronger than Mitch Morse. And if he works out the way that the Buffalo Bills and their coaching staff, Aaron Cromer, McDermott, Joe Brady, if he works out the way they hope, they may be better on the offensive line than they were last year. And I thought the offensive line was a strength last year, especially running the football, and in particularly in between the tackles. I can envision Ray Davis having a field day running through bigger holes in the interior throughout this season. So anyway, I consider Connor a big X Factor. I'm going to take a quick break, come back, get a drink of water, and continue under the radar Bills X Factors for this year. All right, we are back here and we're going over some of the Bills under the radar, sort of anyway. I mean, nothing's completely under the radar, but sort of under the radar X Factors for this season. On my list, a guy who a handful of days ago, I would be willing to bet most football fans, even some of the more hardcore football fans, never even heard of. And that's the new kick and punt returner, Brandon Codrington. The Bills had, and this is why I consider him an X factor, all right? The Buffalo Bills had all summer long OTAs, minicamp, training camp, the preseason to see and evaluate what they've had at returner. And obviously, with the rule changes, there's at least a good chance that kick returns are going to be important to games this year, certainly more than they've been in years past. So they've had a lot of time to evaluate the incumbents, what they had. The rookie, Daquan Hardy, KJ Hamler, Andy Isabella. None of them were enough to satisfy, and none of them made the roster. Hardy and Hamler are now on the Bills practice squad. Isabella was just outright released, looking for work somewhere out there, but he's not a Buffalo Bill anymore. Kick returns, again, probably a bigger thing this season. And the Bills felt strongly enough about Codrington that they were willing to trade, not a big trade, but still, they gave up a 6th pick for a 7th round swap with a divisional rival to get a 5'9" defensive back out of North Carolina Central. I'm sure the Bills made that move because they didn't feel confident that they would be successful getting a waiver claim. They only had a 28th priority. So if the Bills don't make a trade, Codrington goes to waivers, and the Bills like him, they're sweating out 27 other teams who had the ability to pick him up. And they didn't want to take that chance. So apparently they liked him. With the Jets this preseason, he had 2 kickoffs for 75 yards. He returned 6 punts for 83 yards, made 4 fair catches, played like 70 snaps on defense, but honestly, I don't really give a shit. Not really thinking about him as a defender, which is weird because with Hardy, before he got cut earlier this week, I kind of was thinking about him in a depth role. But I feel good about Elam. I feel good about Ingram as your outside corner depth, and then Cam Lewis looks like he's going to be the backup. Not looks like he is going to be the backup to Taron Johnson. So anyway, he does play some defense too. And I like that the Bills had 3 preseason games of film to kind of evaluate him as opposed to just college tape against, I mean, let's just be honest, pretty shitty competition. So for dummies out there, I say it all the time, who say the preseason means absolutely nothing. I point to having the ability for a team like the Bills to watch film of somebody that they wouldn't have otherwise. Just like I said many times this week, tell Joe Andreessen that the preseason means nothing. You don't make the team without an incredible preseason. Maybe the Bills don't want to sign Scene to the practice squad without him having a good preseason. So does, on some levels, at least anyway, basically what I'm getting there is the preseason definitely, it means something. And again, sorry for coming off maybe as a little bit insulting towards fans who feel that way. I completely disagree. In terms of special teams, whatever, and I mean nothing. Let's not forget, just last season, Deontay Hardy was not really a factor much at all during the year, like literally at all. But when the lights were the biggest, the game was the biggest game of the year. You win the division, lose, who knows? All right. Biggest game of the year. Deontay Hardy takes a punt, brings it back to the house, literally turns that game around, led the Bills to a win, led the Bills to a division title, and led the Bills to a number 2 seed. And they might not have gotten that were it not for a punt return by Deontay Hardy. He was a worthy investment for that singular play alone. So if the Bills are going to swap late round picks to get a guy, again, I question it a little bit, just like I said with Scene, any guy who's either cut or you're willing to just dump off a late round pick for, especially if it's not trying to get rid of a big contract, I'm going to be a little bit skeptical. There's going to be a little bit of pessimism in me. But all in all, you go get yourself a returner for that price, one you like, and I'm on board with it. And it could be at some point this year where he's actually an X factor on the Bills season, just like it was with Deontay Hardy in 2023. My next one, actually a pair of offensive linemen here. Alec Anderson and or Ryan Vandermark. Get back to the offensive line here. I know we already talked about Connor McGovern. One of the most low-key, amazing things about the 2023 Buffalo Bills is all 5 guys on the offensive line started all 17 games together. That shit rarely happens. And you cannot count on that happening again this year. And I bring up Alec Anderson and Ryan Vandermark as X factors, depending on how you want to approach this topic. It could be concerns just as easily, because the bottom line is this: the Buffalo Bills, as things stand right now, have 0 proven NFL depth on their offensive line as things stand. Vandermark, he's your swing tackle this year. Played 46 snaps all of last year. And again, pretty much a guy would come in for a couple plays to get dinged up and he'd be out there for a few plays or a couple times near the end of a game of blowout. 46 snaps, 0 starts, of course. Meanwhile, Anderson, I talk about Vandermark having just 46 snaps last year. Well, guess what? His 46 snaps is 46 more than Alec Anderson played for the Bills last year. And Alec Anderson, as things stand, is very likely the first interior guy off the bench. He is Ryan Bates. Basically, Alec Anderson is last year's Ryan Bates. Now, Ryan Bates didn't end up having to be a factor last year. Again, because they stayed healthy. But that could be scary. Will Clapp has some starting experience, and he's on the practice squad. But quite frankly, I don't think he's any good. At least not based on what I saw this summer anyway. He was cut and brought back to the practice squad. I mean, it's kind of like backup quarterback. You hope you don't see them much besides a fourth quarter of a lopsided game, but you can't count on that. So if anybody goes down, guys who we're not even talking or thinking about much right now, Alec Anderson, Ryan Vandermark, they could end up being big time under the radar X factors. Second last topic here, Dorian Williams. I'm not even sure he qualifies as under the radar at this point. But guess what, dudes? It's my show. I make the calls here. I make the tough choices, and he's going there. I could have put him on the obvious ones, but I'm not quite sure is that obvious. Regardless, look, I'm a pretty big Dorian Williams guy. I think the skill is there without question, actually. I think he's what many people like to call a traitsy guy. Yeah, he's a traitsy dude. I call him a guy who could end up being a kind of a low-key, critical success to this defense, just like Terrell Bernard was last year. Now, they're both third-round picks, back-to-back years. That's a similarity. But there's also a difference. The difference is Terrell Bernard kind of became starting middle linebacker last year by default. But when he was, he completely ran with it. While Dorian Williams is the will linebacker, the starter, because straight up, Matt Milano went down. He got hurt. The issues for Dorian Williams is mental. It's the mental mistakes, fundamentals, being fooled by play action. I talk up Cover One, Joe Marino, all these guys who are great at breaking down film and seeing things like that. In the case of Dorian Williams, You could be an average Joe or an average Joni football fan and just watch the game. Be like, oh shit, what is 42 doing out there? He shouldn't be there. So like I said, fooled by play action, missing assignments, being in the wrong spot at the wrong time. That's kind of what got him into the shit house last year with Sean McDermott. To the point, they're at home playing in a playoff game against Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and the Kansas City Chiefs, and they're playing AJ Klein out there in front of him. Again, with the season quite literally on the line, that led to a million-and-one offseason beefs that I had with fans and some content creators because AJ Klein, there's a middle linebacker, Dorian pretty much was exclusive of Will. I'm like, I don't give a shit. He couldn't have possibly been any worse than AJ Klein. We'll never know because they stuck with AJ Klein way, way too long. But anyway, you get my point here. Dorian Williams is a year older now. He's a year more experienced. Hopefully, he's a year wiser. Physically, his ceiling is way, way higher than veterans like Nicholas Morrow, who's on this team, or than Deion Jones, who's on this team. He was cut, but he's back up on the practice squad. Him taking a step up like Terrell Bernard did last year, or hell, that might be, you can't add. That's a little bit of a big ask for Dorian Williams, but they can even be 80% of what Terrell Bernard was last year when Terrell was healthy. That would be huge for the team this year. Matt Milano might be back in early December. Matt Milano might not be back at all during the regular season. Matt Milano might not be back even if they go all the way to the Super Bowl. Dorian Williams, whether you consider him under the radar or right at the forefront, he's going to be potentially, at least anyway. I mean, he could also suck after 1 or 2 weeks, and then he goes away and you go with Morrow, whoever. But right now, the way I feel, Dorian Williams is a big X factor for this team this year. Last one, then I'm going to let you out of here. Actually, 2 receivers, Matt Collins and MVS. I kind of wanted to put them together. Look, it's obvious that Dalton Kincaid and Curtis Samuel and Khalil Shakir, they're going to be very important parts of the passing game. I think that's really obvious. I think it's also widely assumed, I'm make sure I say assumed here, you could throw Keon Coleman in that category. But me, personally, I'm pumping the brakes at least a little bit on that one. And it's not that I don't like Keon Coleman. It's not that I don't think Keon Coleman is going to develop into a good NFL player. If things go right, maybe more than just good at some point. I simply am of the mindset that it's going to take some time and perhaps kind of to use a wrestling term, a slow burn. Much of the chagrin of fans who are hoping that, Keon Coleman's going to come out week 1, have 6 catches for 88 yards and a pair of touchdowns. It could happen, but to me, it's more likely that he's going to get eased into this lineup and it's going to take some time for him to get used to starting NFL corner caliber players up in his face, disrupting his routes, learning how to get off routes, and just becoming a better route runner and getting some separation. He might have some moments. I just think on a consistent level, it's going to take Keon Coleman some time. Anyway, I think Matt Collins for sure, and possibly MVS too, are going to be X factors this year for this offense. I look at Matt Collins, and I was pretty excited that the Bills signed him. He was an offensive waste in Atlanta last year. I mean, he did nothing on offense, but he was pretty good in Vegas 2 years ago, nearly 700 yards. I think he had 690 yards receiving with Vegas. He's a great blocker, which it matters, by the way. That being a great blocker is going to get him on the field a lot, especially if you think the Bills are going to run the football more this year and have more of a balance than they've had at any point during the Josh Allen era, which is certainly possible. He's a really strong blocker. That's going to get him on the field. Quite frankly, I think he's going to outsnap Keon Coleman. Maybe significantly even. I'm talking about at least for the first half of the season. Let's not go too far down the road here. I could see a game or two where he's carrying, doing some heavy lifting with this offense. And I'm including the passing game because he's got some skills there. We just don't really talk about them so much because we're always talking about Keon Coleman, Dalton Kincaid, Samuel, and Shakir. And then ditto for MVS. Well, maybe not early on. In fact, I'd be willing to bet probably not early on. I wouldn't be surprised if he's inactive early in the season, often, but he'll have a role at some point. And when you evaluate the Bills' talent at wide receiver, MVS kind of rises to the top in terms of production when it matters. At least he has. You know, he's been good in the postseason, and you can't dismiss that. I know some people just want to blow that off as nothing. I mean, come on. The Buffalo Bills are a team right now, and their biggest hurdle has been, their singular biggest hurdle has been Josh Allen plays good enough minus the Cincy game in 2022 for this team to win, and too many of his co-stars straight up let him down. Well, MVS is the opposite. He lets you down all season long, dropping passes, probably want to throw shit at your TV, you get so pissed at him. Not a great route runner, no special teams value, but he's turned it up in the playoffs. Not just once, he's done it for multiple years. Last year, he had 3 catches of over 35 yards in the postseason. He scored a touchdown in the Super Bowl. The year before that, in the 2022 AFC Championship game, he had over 100 yards receiving when Kansas City beat Cincy, the same team that beat the shit out of Buffalo the week before. So this dude plays, man. He only had any drops in the postseason either. So assuming the Bills get to the playoffs, of course, MVS could end up being a real big X factor. I just don't think it's going to happen early. See how things play out. But anyway, those are my kind of like under the radar, at least sort of under the radar, Buffalo Bills X factors going into this season. Speaking of this season, like I said, we got one more week of preview shows and then finally real football to be able to talk about. It's going to be a special week here at Talking Buffalo next week. I'll talk about the lineup on Monday's show after this weekend, but we're going to have 2 live shows for sure. I'm going to have at least 2 guests on both those live shows as well. It's going to be a lot of fun. Tell you about that Monday. But anyway, enjoy the weekend. Thank you very much, as always, for listening, for watching. If you have not yet subscribed, please go ahead. Do that right now. Enjoy the weekend. Be back. Brand new episodes on Monday.